Baik, terima kasih kerana masih setia bersama Niaga AWANI pada pagi ini. Dan selepas 68 tahun merdeka, Malaysia dah banyak berubah dari sebuah ekonomi pertanian kepada ekonomi digital dan juga teknologi. Namun kalau kita lihat di sebalik angka pelaburan, kadar pertumbuhan dan juga laporan rasmi yang dikeluarkan oleh kerajaan, oleh DOSM dan sebagainya, kita lihat rakyat masih bergelut dengan realiti. Jadi apa makna sebenar merdeka ekonomi untuk rakyat Malaysia hari ini? Dan kita nak tahu juga persoalan itu dijawab oleh pakar ekonomi yang telah bersedia dengan saya pada pagi ini dalam studio, iaitu Dr. Nizam, Ketua Muamalat Bank Muamalat Malaysia Berhad pada pagi ini. Mungkin apa khabar dan selamat Hari Kebangsaan yang ke-68, Doktor?
Khabar baik. Terima kasih Nabilah kerana masih sudi menjemput saya pada Hari Kemerdekaan ini.
Ya, pada hari Isnin, pada Hari Merdeka juga kita masih bekerja, Doktor. Ya. Kalau kita nak lihat, kalau kita nak throwback dalam pada pasca 68 tahun kita merdeka ini, bagaimana Doktor nak boleh rangkumkan ataupun sedikit gambaran secara orang kata amnya berkenaan dengan kemerdekaan ekonomi, apa yang boleh Doktor rangkumkan?
Baik, saya rasa sebenarnya banyak dah kita saksikan perkembangan ekonomi negara di peringkat global, dan banyak dia orang kata tu mencorak bagaimana dasar ekonomi itu digarap dan sebagainya lah. Dan saya kira kalau saya kira 2 dekad 3 dekad yang sebelum ini mungkin banyak perbincangan dasar tersebut, dasar ekonomi tersebut mungkin banyak tertumpu kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi, maksudnya KDNK lah, keluaran negara kasar. Tapi selepas itu saya melihat banyak kritikan yang diberikan terhadap angka KDNK tersebut ataupun GDP, dan maka disebabkan kritikan itu saya lihat banyak pendekatan yang mana melihat sesuatu ataupun kayu ukur ekonomi itu dilihat dalam pelbagai dimensi. Dan di sini saya kira isu seperti kesenjangan ekonomi, maksudnya income gap itu menjadi satu tunggak ataupun tunjang dalam bentukan dasar, dan saya kira disebabkan mungkin kematangan dalam menilai pemasaran ekonomi tersebut telah memungkinkan dasar itu saban tahun setiap RMK dan sebagainya dilihat semakin matang dalam bagaimana ia cuba menyelesaikan permasalahan ekonomi dan mengambil kira tentang perkembangan semasa, terutamanya berkait rapat tentang teknologi. Jadi satu evolusi yang sedang kita lalui dan kita akan terus lalui, dan seharusnya dapat memerdekakan kita lah dari segi bagaimana kita memahami isu ekonomi dan kesan kepada kita sendirilah.
68 tu mungkin kita lihat sebagai 2 angka yang mungkin kalau kita nak bandingkan dengan negara lain mungkin sedikit kecil ataupun mungkin tak sebesar mereka. Tapi kalau kita nak lihat dari segi penerimaan reformasi ekonomi yang telah diperkenalkan kerajaan, banyak yang telah diperkenalkan. Kalau mungkin kalau sebelum ni di awal kemerdekaan mungkin susah untuk rakyat menerima ataupun orang kata ambil apa yang diperkenalkan. Tapi pada waktu ini, di zaman selepas pasca 68 tahun, di era reformasi digital dan juga orang kata teknologi ini, bagaimana penerimaan rakyat pada waktu ini?
Saya kira rakyat dah semakin matang kerana pertamanya kita dah ada perkembangan teknologi maklumat yang saya kira begitu berkembang dengan begitu rapid, begitu orang kata tu begitu agresif dan sebagainya, dan ramai telah cakna tentang pemasaran ekonomi, dan saya kira isunya adalah bagaimana dasar kerajaan apabila ia telah digembelingkan, telah dibentuk dan sebagainya dan dilaksanakan, bagaimana nak diberitahu, nak dimaklumkan kepada rakyat tujuan, objektifnya, kesannya, dan memberi orang kata tu update ataupun kemaskini. Di isu bagi saya nampak banyak berkitaran berkenaan dengan komunikasi. Kerana dengan komunikasi yang tepat, maka ia boleh mewujudkan suatu tanggapan yang betul dan akan membentuk suatu behavior ataupun tidak tanduk yang lebih baiklah. Kerana dalam dunia informasi teknologi yang begitu canggih ini, ancaman seperti fake news dan sebagainya itu merupakan asam garam lah dengan bagaimana kita nak menghadapi situasi semasa. Jadi di sini cabaran yang saya nampak, selain memastikan dasar itu adalah dasar yang bagus, selain daripada itu bagaimana ia disampaikan kepada rakyat, itu saya rasa satu perkara yang juga sama pentingnya untuk memastikan kesejahteraan rakyat itu dapat dicapai.
Komunikasi itu antara yang selalu kita bincangkan dalam orang kata reformasi ini, sebab kerajaan dalam usaha untuk mengimbangi perubahan atau pertumbuhan kerajaan, dan pada masa sama adalah untuk kesejahteraan sosial rakyat juga. Jadi bagaimana untuk kita mencapai titik tengah itu, Doktor?
Ya, di sini yang saya rasa mungkin strategi komunikasi itu mungkin perlu dibedah lah, maksudnya di peringkat kalau profesional tu macam mana nak diceritakan. Mungkin kalau bercerita dengan nombor-nombor ni, mungkin golongan profesional dan mereka akan selesa lah untuk menerima dan mendengar angka-angka ini dan kesannya kepada ekonomi. Tapi kalau golongan di kawasan luar bandar, mungkin golongan yang pendidikannya itu kurang dan sebagainya, sudah pasti gaya bahasa juga memainkan peranan untuk kita sampaikan maklumat tersebut. Dan di sini saya rasa kombinasi antara menggunakan platform sosial media dan juga berhubung secara terus dengan pemegang taruh tersebut perlu disekalikan. Kalau tidak, nanti ada berlaku kata tu vacuum. Vacuum dari segi maklumat, dan di sini akan terjadinya salah faham dan ada mungkin ada golongan yang mahu mengambil kesempatan menangguh di air keruh dan sebagainya, akan menyebabkan kekeliruan tentang isu yang mahu ataupun dasar yang mahu dilaksanakan tadi.
Kita boleh ambil contoh pada sebelum ni yang peluasan SST. Kita sebenarnya segelintir saja yang dikenakan peluasan SST, tapi salah faham itu berlaku di peringkat awam, di golongan rakyat ini. Tapi kalau kita nak bercakap dengan kos sara hidup yang rakyat terhimpit dalam golongan middle income trap ini, ini yang masih menjadi isu yang kebanyakan kita bincangkan juga. Dan kalau kita lihat inflasi naik lebih pantas daripada gaji itu sendiri, dan ini kita nak kaitkan juga dengan golongan-golongan anak muda ataupun remaja yang dalam golongan pertengahan yang mereka rasa terperangkap ini, gaji tak naik tapi harga rumah melambung dan sebagai contoh juga hutang isi rumah juga meningkat. Jadi adakah kita akan memang selamanya terjerat dalam perangkap ini, Doktor, ataupun Doktor melihat ada peluang ataupun ruang untuk penambahbaikan, ataupun ada sedikit yang kita boleh lampu cahaya peluang penambahbaikan?
Baik, saya suka apa yang Nabilah sebut tentang gaji, inflasi dan sebagainya, dan kerajaan pula sedang berusaha untuk membetulkan kedudukan kewangannya. Pemerhatian saya lah ya, usaha ni usaha yang bagus, usaha yang murni. Cuma bagi saya mungkinlah pemerhatian saya, rakyat mungkin kurang memahami hala tuju dasar tersebut. Contoh kita sebut tadi rasionalisasi subsidi kan. Ceritanya adalah kita nak pastikan subsidi hanya yang layak terima, dan kemudian kalau bila dah dapat golongan itu dapat disasarkan, berlaku penjimatan, dan penjimatan itu dapat disalurkan ke tempat lain pula. Itu cerita yang biasa diceritakan, yang dimaklumkan, yang saya kira betul, tak ada masalah. Cuma apa big picture dia, apa gambaran besarnya. Jadi sebenarnya kita melihat satu keadaan ini, pemerhatian saya dan pemahaman saya, sebenarnya kita nak menghala satu ekonomi yang berasaskan pasaran, yang mana peranan kerajaan itu sangat minimum dari segi terutamanya penentuan harga. Ni ceritanya agak macam textbook sikit, tapi itulah hala tuju dia. Itulah realitinya, kerana apabila harga itu ditentukan oleh kuasa pasaran yang adil, yang telus dan cekap, itu akan menentukan alokasi ataupun peruntukan sumber-sumber tadi itu ke tempat yang lebih efektif atau produktif. Contoh, kita sebut tentang subsidi tadi kan. Kalau penjimatan subsidi tersebut, okeylah sebahagiannya disalurkan kepada bantuan tunai, tapi boleh disalurkan untuk pendidikan, kan? Boleh buat sekolah, classroom ataupun darjah lebih selesa. Kemudian kalau sektor kesihatan akan menjadikan orang kata tu aksesnya lebih baik dan orang lebih ramai yang sihat. Jadi ramai yang dipandai, ramai yang sihat, bukankah itu akan menjadikan negara itu lebih produktif? Jadi sebenarnya kuasa pasaran itu amat penting untuk memberikan satu isyarat tentang bagaimana sumber itu patut diagihkan. Jadi itu sebenarnya yang saya nampaklah intipati hala tuju itu. Kerana yang nak buat konsolidasi fiskal sebenarnya, kerajaan dia nak tarik diri dia daripada pasaran sebenarnya. Dia cuma peranannya hanyalah sebagai menentukan platform pasaran itu adil, seperti adil, cekap dan telus. Dia macam sukan lah ni, Nabilah. Macam kita main bola kan. Kerajaan tu peranan dia sediakan padang tu kena berumput, rata, gol tu tetap sebenarnya. Lepas tu mungkin boleh sediakan coach, tapi bila masuk bermain bola, mereka yang rajin bertraining, yang memang betul belajar pasal main bola tu, itulah yang mungkin menang dalam permainan tersebut. Jadi maksudnya bila bersaing, kita bersaing secara adil, sama. Itu sebenarnya hal tuju yang saya nampak lah. Tapi cerita tu mungkin kurang diberitahu kepada rakyat umum, dan mungkin ada satu stigma juga bila cakap pasal pasaran, ekonomi pasaran ni, dia ada satu stigma, mungkin ekonomi pasaran pun boleh dimanipulasi. Jadi itu mungkin satu perkara yang perlu ditangani lah. Tapi hal tuju tu, kalau hal tuju jelas, saya rasa rakyat akan faham kenapa kerajaan buat begitu.
Ataupun mungkin ni bukan sebab ni dasar yang kurang popular yang dilakukan kini.
Itulah dia, pasal dia kurang popular. Lepas tu sementara kita nak jadi yang lebih baik, akan ada satu keadaan yang kita perlu lalui lah. Mungkin dalam tempoh terdekat ni mungkin ada berlaku kenaikan harga barang dan sebagainya, tapi adalah juga langkah macam contoh bayaran tunai tu, tujuannya itulah untuk menangani kesan jangka pendek. Tapi pengakhirannya menjadi ekonomi pasaran yang cekap, adil dan telus. Itu dia punya yang saya nampaklah sepatutnya hala tuju dia. Tapi sementara ni laluilah the painful process tu lah.
Ya, itu yang kebanyakan rakyat tak boleh terima. Kesan dia yang tahu adalah kesan jangka pendek dan nampak depan mata itu sendiri. Jadi mungkin kalau doktor boleh jelaskan, inilah masanya untuk rakyat saksikan apa kesan jangka panjang yang boleh mereka jangkakan dan berapa lama masa yang diperuntukkan.
Bagi saya itu yang kembali balik pada isu komunikasi. Saya melihat contoh data, kembali kepada data balik. Suku pertama hari tu kita punya saiz defisit fiskal tu mengecil. Kalau kita lihat separuh tahun yang pertama mengecil ke paras 40.4 bilion. Saiz kepada ekonomi 4.2%. Tempoh yang sama tahun lalu defisitnya ada 51.5 bilion, saiz kepada ekonomi 5.5%. So menurun. Apa yang menjadi dia menurun? Sebab tahun lepas antaranya yang kita buat penyiasan subsidi diesel, meningkatkan cukai perkhidmatan daripada 6% ke 8%, macam-macam lagi lah. Dan sekarang ni kita bercakap tentang perkembangan skop AST dan sebagainya. Jadi maksudnya langkah-langkah tu dah mencapai sasaran.
Dah dapat saksikan kesan.
Dan kerajaan pula mempunyai ruang fiskal yang lebih lagi. Dan sebab itu jugalah saya percaya kenapa Yang Amat Perdana Menteri baru-baru ini mengumumkan langkah seperti pemberian sara, pengakalan tur dan sebagainya. Jadi kalau kita dapat cantumkan cerita itu, usaha kerajaan dan apa outcome dia, outcome tu nampaklah. Contoh yang sara RM100 tu kan, semua orang dapat. Jadi kalau itu yang dapat ditunjukkan, saya percaya rakyat boleh bersama-sama lah menghadapi cabaran ini. Itu saya rasa tema kemerdekaan itu sangat tepat lah dalam isu ini, supaya rakyat itu merdeka pemikirannya itu, tidak terlalu fokus pada stigma yang lama, terus nak dapat cepat je dia punya outcome tu.
Saya suka merdeka pemikiran. Selain merdeka ekonomi, kena merdekakan dulu pemikiran itu. Tapi kalau kita nak buka sikit skop perbincangan, kalau kita lihat pelaburan asing baru-baru ini melonjak dalam sektor teknologi dan digital sebanyak RM190 bilion yang diluluskan setengah tahun pertama. Okey, kalau kita lihat dengan kejayaan ini, bagaimana ataupun sejauh mana pelaburan ini boleh benar-benar membawa balik kepada rakyat? Ini kita berbalik kepada apa yang kita bincangkan tadi. Apa yang boleh mereka jangkakan, sebab dia tak nampak benda tu.
Betul. Yang diumumkan adalah pelaburan yang telah diluluskan. Kemudian sementara ni saya nampak ni pihak MITI pun saban tahun memperbaiki komunikasinya, maka dinyatakan berapa pula jumlah pelaburan yang telah dilaksanakan. Peratusannya itu lebih 80% tak salah saya. Jadi itu pun membantulah. Tapi untuk bergerak ke hadapan, seperti yang Nabilah cakap tadi, rakyat tak nampak kan. Jadi nak menampakkannya tu mungkin kena beritahulah syarikat apa, di mana, kawasan mana. Mungkin kena ada satu perincian yang lebih yang rakyat boleh kaitkan sendiri. Tapi jelah nak bagi tahu semua tu dalam satu press statement, press conference tu mungkin tak muat lah kan. Jadi di situ kena ada satu perancangan lah dari segi strategi komunikasi tu, macam mana kita nak sampaikan kepada rakyat kejayaan-kejayaan ini yang sebenarnya usaha kerajaan ini membuahkan hasil. Dan itu saya rasa itu kena serahkan kepada pakar komunikasi lah.
Tapi Menteri MITI pun ada lakukan pendekatan dengan buat video pendek berbentuk vertikal yang mudah sampai kepada semua pengguna-pengguna media sosial, ada beruniform Star Wars dan sebagainya. Mungkin itu lebih mudah untuk mereka ataupun terimalah. Tapi kalau kita bercakap berkenaan dengan pelaburan ini juga, apa mungkin adakah risiko kita terperangkap dalam model ekonomi FDID independen sebab sekarang kita terlalu bergantung dengan orang kata pelaburan luar. Jadi macam mana rakyat masih tidak merasai limpahan walaupun angka pelaburan besar itu diumumkan, pelaburan ini, jangkaan pelaburan ini, macam-macam lah. Tu yang persoalan ditanyakan dalam media sosial.
Baik. Kalau bercakap tentang pelaburan ni, kita bercakap tentang struktur ekonomi kita lah. Yang mana FDI itu salah satu komponen yang utama bagaimana dia membawa aktiviti pelaburan. Dan saya rasa FDI ini sudah lama menjadi satu tunjang bagaimana dia boleh mempengaruhi pertumbuhan ekonomi negara. Dan di sini peranan bagaimana domestic investment itu perlu juga memainkan peranan yang besar. Tapi bercakap tentang investment ni, sebenarnya investment ni dia banyak berkait rapat tentang juga dari segi pendidikan. Maksudnya kita nak masuk pendidikan tu, bila kita cakap investment untuk apa? Investment untuk menaikkan kapasiti pengeluaran. Jadi ada unsur-unsur inovasi, ada unsur-unsur kreativiti. Jadi dia melibatkan kepada modal insan. Kalau kita cakap pasal startup, syarikat pemula, kita sedang bercakap tentang bagaimana syarikat ni berkreativiti, sangat kreatif untuk membangunkan satu produk. Jadi nak membangunkan satu produk tu dan dalam banyak mengikut teknologi. Jadi itu berkait rapat tentang pendidikan. Jadi saya rasa pendidikan tu sangat penting lah. Kenapa ia berkaitan yang secara langsung dengan pelaburan. Kerana pelaburan dalam konsep ekonomi ini lebih kepada bagaimana dia nak berinovasi. Dengan inovasi itu dan bantuan teknologi itu, itulah yang akan menjadikan pertumbuhan ekonomi itu lebih berkualiti. Jadi dia kena ada satu connection lah. Jadi perbincangan itu tadi balik pada tema memerdekakan minda. So maksudnya kalau kita boleh kaitkan FDI, DDI dengan pendidikan pula. Jadi itu saya rasa boleh menjadikan rakyat faham lah kot kenapa investment ni sangat penting dalam komponen KDNK tadi tu. Kalau teori ni Nabilah, KDNK ni ada C plus I plus G X minus M. Itu dia punya teori lah. Yang kita cakap tadi tu investment dengan I tadi tu. So dalam I tu sendiri macam mana dibangunkan itu, ada unsur-unsur pendidikan sebenarnya.
Dan memerdekakan pemikiran itu, kita boleh start dengan itu terlebih dahulu.
Dengan ilmu dulu.
Okey, banyak lagi yang tak nak bincangkan sebenarnya, tapi kita berbakikan 2 minit saja. Mungkin kalau melihat kepada perubahan sepanjang 68 tahun kita merdeka, melihat kepada perubahan ekonomi, reformasi kerajaan, adakah doktor menjangkakan generasi-generasi kita akan datang akan orang kata ada kebimbangan yang akan escalate pada masa akan datang melihat kepada apa yang berlaku dalam dan juga luar negara?
Betul. Saya rasa cabaran ekonomi ini bukan unik di Malaysia, di serata dunia sebenarnya. Dan sekali lagi berkait rapat dengan komunikasi. Dengan adanya komunikasi tersebut, maklumat itu ada pelbagai. Dan sini bukan satu cabaran lah. Saya percaya mana-mana negara, mana-mana kerajaan akan mahu melaksanakan dasar yang baik untuk negara tersebut, termasuklah Malaysia. Dan di sini bagaimana kita nak meredakan keresahan rakyat kita, terutamanya golongan muda itu. Di sini satu ialah dasar kena betul lah, dasar kena yang baik, tepat dan sebagainya, pelaksanaan pun kena tuntas dan sebagainya. Tetapi berbalik pada bagaimana maklumat itu, komunikasi itu disampaikan kepada golongan muda. Kerana bila komunikasi yang tepat itu, dia akan impact pada confidence, keyakinan. Dan keyakinan juga akan mempengaruhi kreativiti, inovasi, itu juga memberikan peranan. Jadi ada kesan rantaiannya itu. Jadi ialah bagaimana nak uruskan ni bukan mudah. Dengan adanya social media ni, saya kira dia akan terus dan terus berkembang. Cuma isunya bagaimana perkara yang diuruskan dengan baiklah.
Okey, satu soalan saya nak selitkan juga kepada doktor. Mungkin apa makna merdeka kepada doktor bersama dengan 68 tahun Hari Kebangsaan?
Baik, merdeka bagi saya adalah mempunyai jati diri yang tinggi, tidak terpengaruh dengan kuasa-kuasa luar, pemikiran luar, tapi berpaksikan pada ilmu. Dan di sinilah kemerdekaan itu akan membantu dalam meningkatkan peradaban manusia. Jadi merdeka, peradaban, civilization sangat berkait rapat. Jadi itu saya rasa kalau kita dapat definisikan kemerdekaan itu dalam keadaan itu, lebih bermaknalah erti kemerdekaan itu.
Baik, terima kasih diucapkan kepada Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid, Ketua Ekonomi Bank Mulai Malaysia Berhad atas perkongsian dan masa yang telah diberikan kepada kita sepanjang 20 minit ini. Dan banyak lagi yang akan kami kongsikan selepas ini, tapi kita akan berhenti rehat seketika dahulu, kembali selepas ini.
Daulat tuanku.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Saya Kabeer Aziz dan ini Niaga AWANI. Kita mulakan Niaga AWANI untuk jam ini dengan perkembangan pasaran. Indeks Ketidaktentuan Pasaran Global VIX kini reda kepada sekitar 14 hingga 15 mata berbanding kemuncaknya 52 mata pada April lalu. Manakala FBMK LCI turut pulih ke paras 1602.45 mata selepas jatuh ke 1400 mata dalam tempoh sama mencatatkan kenaikan hampir 14%. Pemulihan ini mencerminkan beralihnya sentimen pelabur selepas tekanan ketidakpastian dasar perdagangan Amerika Syarikat, namun persoalan utama kekal. Adakah kestabilan ini bersifat berterusan atau hanya sementara? Dan apakah pengajaran yang boleh diambil pelabur daripada turun naik pasaran sejak April hingga kini? Dan untuk kita berbincang lanjut, kita bersama Muhammad Siddiq Jantan, Ketua Penyelidikan Pelaburan UOB Kehian Wealth Advisors. Assalamualaikum Siddiq Jantan.
Assalamualaikum.
Okey, baik. Siddiq, mengapa indeks VIX dan FBMK LCI menjadi penanda penting untuk para pelabur?
Okey, baik. Kabeer, kalau kita tengok indeks VIX atau yang sering dikenali sebagai indeks ketakutan, ianya mengukur volatility ataupun ketidaktentuan yang tersirat di dalam S&P 500, memberikan isyarat awal tentang sentimen risiko pelabur global. So, paras VIX seperti yang kita tahu sekarang ni berlega di antara 14 hingga 15 mata semasa untuk masa ini menunjukkan keyakinan pasaran, tetapi pelabur boleh menggunakan turun naik VIX ini, contohnya seperti Kabeer katakan tadi, lonjakan ke 52 mata pada April 2025 untuk mengenal pasti peluang lindung nilai melalui instrumen seperti VIX futures atau option S&P 500. So untuk FBMKSCI yang kita tahu ianya merangkumi 30 syarikat terbesar di Bursa Malaysia adalah penanda utama kesihatan ekonomi Malaysia dengan exposure untuk sektor keuangan. Kalau kita tengok exposure total dia adalah sebanyak 41.8% dan sensitivity terhadap dasar domestik seperti pelaburan infrastruktur. So ini akan memberi implikasi kepada pergerakan FBMKSCI. So korelasi ataupun perhubungan antara FBMKSCI dan S&P 500 kalau kita tengok untuk satu tahun ini, iaitu sejak 2024, ianya kira-kira sebanyak 0.45 yang menjadikan aset diversifikasi yang kuat dalam pertumbuhan global. So kalau kita tengok untuk pelabur boleh menganalisis interaksi antara VIX dengan FBMKSCI untuk melihat aliran dana asing ke Malaysia, kerana kalau kita tengok penurunan VIX sering mendahului kemasukan modal ke pasaran baru muncul. Kalau kita tengok untuk keadaan pada April lalu, kemasukan dana asing meningkat pada April ke pasaran Malaysia dan berkurangan di pasaran Amerika Syarikat. So selain itu, analisis teknikal kalau kita boleh buat untuk FBMKSCI dan korelasi dengan S&P 500, dia membolehkan pelabur membina strategi teknikal seperti pelaburan kontra siklika atau lindung nilai terhadap pembetulan pasaran.
Baik, dan mungkin Siddiq boleh jelaskan apakah mungkin faktor utama yang mendorong pemulihan FBMK LCI itu sejak April lalu?
Okey, kalau kita tengok untuk April 2025, seperti yang tadi kita katakan, FBMKSCI mencatat penurunan ke paras 1,400 mata, dan pada minggu ini kalau kita tengok ianya berleka di antara 1,597 hingga 1,600, iaitu lebih kurang sebanyak 14% pemulihan. So ini didorong oleh beberapa faktor. Kalau kita tengok yang pertama, penurunan VIX ke 14 hingga 15 mata, dia mencerminkan keyakinan pasaran global yang disokong oleh yang pertama kita tengok jangkaan penurunan kadar faedah Amerika Syarikat yang kita lihat akan berlaku pada bulan September, iaitu kalau kita tengok untuk penilaian di kalangan penganalisis, jangkaannya di antara 88 hingga 90% yang menjangkakan pemotongan kadar faedah berlaku pada bulan 9 nanti. Dan yang kedua, kalau kita tengok pengukuhan ringgit itu sendiri, kalau kita tengok ringgit dengan USD, dia telah meningkat sebanyak 4%, iaitu bermaksud nilai ringgit ini telah mengukuh sebanyak 4% berbanding dengan US dollar. Dan akhir sekali, pelaburan dalam pusat data oleh gegasi teknologi seperti kalau yang kita sedia maklum, Microsoft dan juga Google turut menyokong sektor pembinaan dan juga utility Malaysia. So untuk domestik pula, kalau kita tengok dasar domestik seperti penyasaran subsidi, kedua pengurusan defisit akaun negara, dan juga yang ketiga insentif infrastruktur meningkatkan keyakinan terhadap syarikat. So kalau kita tengok S&P 500 yang naik 0.78% kepada 6,389 didorong oleh pelaburan teknologi, contohnya Apple, dan juga pengumuman pelaburan Apple sebanyak 100 bilion US Amerika syarikat US dollar, dan jangkaan pelonggaran monetary yang turut memberi kesan kepada pasaran Malaysia melalui aliran modal. So pada masa yang sama, kalau kita tengok, kalau kita buat perbandingan sama ada nak melabur di Malaysia ataupun di US, nisbah PE untuk FBM KSI adalah di antara 14.8. Ini menunjukkan valuasi yang masih munasabah berbanding dengan S&P 500. Valuation dia pada paras 23.5. So pelaburan di FBM KSI ini kita lihat menawarkan peluang pelaburan yang lebih berdaya saing dengan nilai valuation yang sederhana berbanding dengan S&P 500.
Baik, dan mungkin bila kita lihat pada kestabilan pasaran semasa, adakah kita boleh anggap perkara itu sebagai kekal atau mungkin bersifat sementara sahaja?
Okey, kalau kita tengok pelaburan, biasanya memang setiap pelaburan itu mempunyai risiko dan kestabilan semasa yang kalau kita tengok pada hari ini perlu dinilai dengan berhati-hati, sebab walaupun FBM KSCI yang menunjukkan momentum dengan kenaikan, rintangan teknikal buat masa ini iaitu di antara 1596 hingga 1611, dan potensi pembetulan sokongan walaupun pada minggu lalu kita tengok berlaku pembetulan untuk satu hari saja, lepas tu pada hari selepasnya FBM KSCI menaik. Ianya bergantung kepada risiko pada masa sekarang, iaitu apa yang saya lihat, faktor luaran seperti dasar perdagangan Amerika Syarikat seperti tarif ke atas import Asia boleh menjejaskan sektor ekspor Malaysia seperti elektronik. Dan yang paling penting kita tengok ketidaktentuan geopolitik dan turun naik harga komoditi seperti minyak sawit turut menimbulkan risiko kepada pasaran Malaysia.
Baik, dan bila kita lihat pada data yang menunjukkan ada turun naik daripada bulan April lalu, apakah mungkin pengajaran utama bagi pelabur-pelabur yang boleh diambil daripada statistik turun naik daripada April lalu itu sendiri?
Okey, actually banyak pengajaran yang boleh diambil oleh pelabur, sebab kita tengok turun naik pasaran sejak April 2025 ini kebanyakannya didorong oleh sebahagian besar oleh panik pelabur berikutan ketidakpastian dasar perdagangan Amerika Syarikat dan juga kebimbangan pelonggaran monetary. Pemulihan seterusnya kalau kita tengok FBM KSCI naik 14% kepada 1,597 dan S&P 500 meningkat dengan 18 kali rekod tertinggi untuk tahun 2025. Ia menunjukkan sifat siklikal pasaran. So tingkah laku pelabur seperti penjualan panik pada April menyalahkan kesan emosi terhadap keputusan pelaburan. So kalau kita tengok banyak pelabur, terutamanya pelabur runcit, mereka bertindak balas secara emosi terhadap lonjakan VIS dan juga kemerosotan pasaran. So apa yang mereka lakukan, mereka akan menjual saham pada harga yang rendah kerana ketakutan akan kerugian berlaku. So data aliran dana yang menunjukkan keluaran bersih sebanyak 1.8 bilion dari pasaran ekuiti Malaysia pada April 2025 dengan pelabur runcit menyumbang majoriti penjualan saham kewangan dan teknologi. Ini merupakan kesan daripada penjualan panik yang berlaku di kalangan pelabur runcit. So kalau kita tengok untuk di Amerika Syarikat, sebab tekanan emosi ini bukan hanya berlaku di Malaysia, malah di semua pasaran. Kalau kita tengok untuk Amerika Syarikat, tekanan jualan dalam S&P 500 pada masa yang sama iaitu pada April, ianya juga dipengaruhi oleh heuristik ketersediaan iaitu availability bias, di mana laporan berita negatif tentang tarif perdagangan dan geopolitikal membesarkan persepsi risiko. So apa yang pelabur buat? Pelabur beraspek dan jual pada paras yang rendah dan hanya melihat pemulihan untuk masuk kepada pasaran selepas 2 ataupun 3 bulan. So dalam keadaan ini, kalau kita tengok, emosi memainkan peranan yang besar dalam pelaburan kerana ia boleh mencetuskan tingkah laku tidak rasional seperti panik iaitu menjual semasa kemerosotan atau keserakahan iaitu membeli semasa kemuncak. So kalau kita tengok teori keuangan tingkah laku, pelabur sering dipengaruhi oleh bias seperti loss aversion, di mana ketakutan terhadap kerugian melebihi harapan untuk keuntungan menyebabkan keputusan jualan yang merugikan seperti yang berlaku pada April hari itu. So sebaliknya, pelabur institusi kalau kita tengok, ia menggunakan strategi sistematik seperti pelaburan kontrasiklikal atau lindung lindah yang dapat memanfaatkan turun naik pasaran.
Baik, Sidi, dan mungkin kita boleh minta sedikit pandangan tentang bagaimana pelabur tempatan di sini boleh menyesuaikan strategi mereka untuk kini dan juga akan datang.
Okey, kalau kita tengok untuk pelabur tempatan khususnya pelabur runcit, untuk menyesuaikan strategi pelaburan dalam konteks pemulihan FBM KSR, sebab kita tengok FBM KSR still di paras awal 1600, so masih banyak peluang untuk indeks bergerak ke paras 1650 sebab di UOB KHN kami optimis untuk FBM KSR untuk melepasi pada paras 1650 pada hujung tahun ini. Dan untuk pelabur, ianya memerlukan pendekatan yang lebih disiplin untuk mengelakkan emosi mempengaruhi keputusan. So seiring dengan dinamik pasaran semasa. So antara strategi yang boleh dilakukan oleh pelabur untuk mengurangkan emosi sambil memaksimumkan peluang pelaburan, iaitu yang pertama, pelaburan berasaskan data, iaitu untuk mengatasi emosi seperti ketakutan terhadap volatility. Pelabur boleh menggunakan algoritma pasaran, algoritma pelaburan atau model berasaskan data seperti analisis regresi untuk menilai prestasi saham. So ini memastikan keputusan berdasarkan metrik asas seperti nisbah hutang ekuiti atau hasil dividen, bukannya semata-mata sentimen pasaran. So yang kedua, kalau boleh buat automasi pelaburan untuk mengelakkan tindakan impulsif, iaitu immediate jual saham bila dengar berita ataupun bila dengar sesuatu keputusan yang tidak menepati pasaran. So pelabur boleh mengelakkan tindakan impulsif ini dengan melaksanakan strategi automatik, iaitu seperti pelan pelaburan berkala yang kita kenal sebagai dollar cost averaging. Ini meminimumkan pengaruh emosi dengan melabur secara konsisten tanpa dipengaruhi oleh turun naik jangka pendek. Yang ketiga, kalau saya boleh katakan, adalah fokus kepada sektor berpotensi tinggi, iaitu memantau sektor yang disokong oleh dasar kerajaan Malaysia seperti tenaga boleh baru, sebagai contoh pelabur di tenaga nasional, dan teknologi seperti pelaburan pusat data oleh Microsoft. Ini dapat membantu pelabur kekal objektif dengan menyasarkan peluang pertumbuhan jangka masa panjang. So pendekatan ini mengalihkan fokus daripada emosi kepada peluang pasaran. Dan akhir sekali, kalau saya boleh tambah, adalah pemantauan makroekonomi dan technical active. So untuk mengelakkan tindak balas emosi terhadap berita pasaran, pelabur harus menjejaki petunjuk makro seperti kadar faedah Amerika Syarikat dan aliran FDI ke Malaysia. So secara teknikal, pantau indikator seperti purata pergerakan 50 hari atau sokongan untuk menentukan titik masuk ataupun titik keluar yang objektif, dan ini dapat mengurangkan pengaruh sentimen jangka pendek.
Baik, dengan itu terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada Siddiq kerana bersama kami di Astro AWANI dalam Niaga AWANI, dan dengan itu kita akan berhenti rehat seketika. Kita akan kembali selepas ini.
Ada yang perdebatan bahawa GST perlu dikembalikan semula kerana ada yang mempertikaikan bahawa SST itu tidak efektif.
Isu buruh kanak-kanak bukan sahaja dalam bentuk fizikal tetapi juga bentuk moden yang lebih licik dan juga terselindung.
Kita tengok buruh kanak-kanak dan ada juga buruh paksa kanak-kanak.
Kumpulan FB dikenali sebagai grup budak-budak sekolah rendah yang didakwa menyebarkan gambar remaja perempuan tidak senonoh telah pun ditutup.
Tok Aman dah nak makbul. Abang nak keluar dari sini kan?
Saya cari bilik sewa kan? Ni rumah saya. Ada nampak tak dua orang budak ni? Ni, saya cari dua orang budak ni.
Tak ada sini lah.
Awak mau ambil jadi anak ya? Tapi awak kena masuk Islam. Ha? Uncle Mike.
Ini pertama kali saya raya tak ada adik-adik.
Tuhan tak bagi apa yang kita nak. Dia bagi apa yang kita perlu.
Uncle Mike buat saya percaya yang ada lagi orang baik dekat dunia ni.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. Niaga Spotlight takes us through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Now, today on analysis, in line with Merdeka Day this weekend, our spotlight is on independence through income. Malaysia turns 68 this Merdeka, and while independence is often spoken of in terms of flags and history, real independence ought to be measured by whether Malaysians and their families can stand on their own 2 feet economically. The numbers remind us, roughly 37% of Malaysian households earn below 5,000 ringgit a month. Women's labour force participation is still stagnant at roughly around 56%, peak compared to men's 83%, and our indigenous Orang Asli communities face poverty rates over 3 times the national average. These are not just statistics, they highlight structural gaps. So we asked today, how do we build true independence through income? How do economically marginalized mothers, rural entrepreneurs, and indigenous artisans translate skills into sustainable livelihoods? Our guests this morning are here to share about how financial inclusion for our most underserved is not a charity model. It's actually good economics. A pleasure to welcome to the studios, together with Ida Zunaidi, co-founder and CEO of Ibupreneur, Colin Ray Salvaratnam, who is the founder of Community Ops, as well as Alina Abdullah, who is the founder of Yellow Tree Malaysia. A very good morning to all of you. How are we doing?
Good. Thank you for having us, Tim.
All right, amazing. So really good to have you all with us here. I'd like to get started and get the discussion going, perhaps by referring towards Alina. So Alina, tell us a little bit about, the Yellow Tree story, as well as the fact that you are essentially helping to contribute to uplifting women's labour force participation rate, even though it may not be within the structured confines of, let's say, a corporate role or a 9-to-5 job. Yes. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, we are a consultancy and a training company. We spend about 30% of our time uplifting underserved communities. So we have 3 pillars. We have women, refugees, as well as Orang Asal. So let's talk a little bit about women. And
sure,
it's critical because we serve many communities from the Orang Asal as well. Women in B40 communities. A lot of training is actually going into helping entrepreneurs in the B40 sector to upskill. And what kind of upskilling are we talking about? We're talking about financial skills, we're talking about mental health skills as well, but most importantly, digital skills and how to build businesses. We do so with partners. We have Ida here with us today, and Ibupreneur is one of our partners for these initiatives.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I will come back to you again when it comes to looking at a couple of structural factors which have helped the women that you work with in particular. But before that, perhaps I can just jump into asking Colin a little bit about community ops, right? So let's look at the community ops story, how you got started, and also the fact that it is distinctly a for-profit initiative. Tell me more.
All right. So with community ops, what we do is we try to, my personal background is that I've been in a couple of social enterprises before.
Right.
And we do work with the Orang Asli communities, but largely we found that there was a lack of ownership in these businesses that we do with the Orang Asli partners itself. And so with community ops, our founding is actually creating businesses where our indigenous members can come up from producer level up to co-owners with us, and we can build the business together and invest in our longevity together. And so we started about 2 years ago, and we've been going on about it, and so it's been going good so far.
So 2 years ago would have been an interesting conjuncture in time. It was, I think, a little after the pandemic lockdowns proper had ended. So let's talk about what kind of figures you're generally looking at when it comes to median payout for each of the Orang Asli producers per month.
Okay. So to answer the median payout for the Orang Aslis per month, our organization is a bit different because they are our co-owners. They actually earn 50%, the equal rate of what the management of community ops owns. So from all of our revenue, we take out all the costs. We leave about 20% of our revenue for retraining purposes and community development purposes. And everything else is split evenly between our indigenous partners and the management itself. Yep.
Well understood. And let's say, in your experience over the past 2 years or so, what is the continuance rate of the Orang Asli producers after the first 3 months?
Okay.
Taking a 90-day window into it.
A 90-day window is great. So previously in my personal work, retention is a very big issue when it comes to majority of initiatives. The ideas behind the initiatives are great, but a lot of the times when the Orang Asli partners are just beneficiaries, retention might become an issue. And so with us, what we have done by making them our partners, we have managed to keep a 100% retention rate over 2 years. And every partner that has started a business with us is still running a business with us today. This means that we have a smaller base of producers that we are able to impact, but we are able to build stronger as opposed to building broad.
Understood. And I think that would be definitely a challenge that we are going to repeatedly address different dimensions of when it comes to retention. Ida, I saw you nodding along to that. Tell me more about how Ibupreneur got its start. And in fact, of course, you are specifically working with women who are economically marginalized and underserved.
So we are a social enterprise where we empower women from the underprivileged groups through education and also employment, because we understand that not everyone wants to run their own micro businesses, but also provide opportunities for them to work for stability. So mainly, I don't look at it, as you mentioned, it's not a charity. We're not solely doing this for social mission, but I really want the platform to be a reliable economic engine where we balance business with our ability to reinvest back to the women community. So we're looking at education, training, giving them supported skills, at the same time tracking and making sure that they are earning income, because at the end of the day, ultimately, that's how they can really change their lives. So we've seen women's lives change, and not only it impacts themselves, but it impacts her children, the family, and the community around it.
Exactly. It's about that multiplier effect, right? Would you be able to give us perhaps a rough estimate of what's the usual median monthly income uplift for women who have participated in Ibupreneur's programs?
So briefly, our academy is 3 months.
Right.
However, we run a minimum...
That 90 days, magic number, right?
Yes. However, working together with Elena, it does take time to see the uplift in median income.
Right.
We do monthly monitoring of their income and business progress for a minimum of 1 year to see the change. So, however, we have seen women's income grown from the baseline at 1,006. So that's just slightly above hardcore poverty line.
That's right.
Up to 4,003 in our data. So that's 200%. So that's really, really progress. So I mean, it's still far from our national median, which is around 6,003. But, you know, the extra hundreds of ringgit, an extra 1,000 could mean that...
For a family, that is the difference between children going to school or having to stay back at home and help mother.
Yes, definitely. So they're no longer in daily financial stress to survive.
Correct.
Now they can think about their goals and their dreams. So we hope that, you know, there's growth, because right now we see that 83% to 84% of them has reached that, across that threshold.
Amazing. And that is truly what is really of value, having crossed above that poverty line and also staying there with the skills that you've acquired over the 90 days and that 1 year of monitoring. So a lot of hard work clearly goes into building up the entrepreneurs and ensuring that they're able to gain and achieve some economic autonomy. Alina, I'd like to ask you about looking in particular at harder numbers, looking at the procurement shift.
Okay.
Now, what percentage of, let's say, procurement spending have Yellow Tree's efforts shifted into these underserved MSMEs without subsidies?
Okay.
So that's an interesting area, right?
Yes,
to
it is.
explore.
Thank you for that question. Just to be clear, we're not directly involved in procurement. So we are consultants and we are coaches, right? So if there were to be a baseline of 0, and let's just say customers, yes, they are looking at purchasing products and services from underserved communities, and there are 10 clients. Highly likely, because Malaysia is actually, we're very, very noble and we're all very generous people. So if we have 10 clients, probably 8 would be interested and keen to buy the products that these underserved community women have, be it biscuits or, you know, handbags, etc. Now that's a lead. Now, how many would like to buy? Yes, so that's the procurement side. Would highly likely be maybe about 30 to 40% of that 8. That would buy from these services. Now, for us, while that's good, it's not so much a procurement challenge, right? Purchasing, Malaysians are very generous when it comes to underserved products, underserved communities.
Very popular, there's favorite brands, and there's space still for many new brands.
Absolutely. But the insights that we have is we feel very, we feel that we need to help. Now, the question is, when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's the second and the third and the fourth purchase.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get that running and going?
Right.
So it's not so much about procurement, it's about the innovation process. Are we addressing this innovation process of getting new products? Are we helping underserved communities produce products that are of quality, that are tested? And of course, one of the greatest things that we love to do is branding, right? Do people remember the brands that they purchase, or are they solely purchasing because they feel sorry for a community? Because that's a big issue that is rarely addressed.
Very true, exactly. And also, I would say perhaps the market positioning of many of the products which are, of course, produced by those from underserved and B40 backgrounds.
Yes.
Usually the positioning is quite often at women-related empowerment career fairs. It might be at national events that are championing that specific cause. It might be part of the CSR efforts of a very large corporation.
That's right.
Right. What your thoughts on this? Not that that's problematic, because you clearly drive sales, but what about expanding outside that lens? How could that be done?
That's extraordinarily challenging. I'll be very frank. I
Sure,
did come up from a corporate background, and the procurement process of purchasing products, goods and products, have to go through such an intense process. And it's such a huge barrier that, you know, even I'm sure Ida could attest that if she wants to, let's just say, bring in the cookies, the products that the women actually are producing, it's such a headache, because perhaps, you know, in this case, could it be quality? And for other social enterprises, could it be halal certification? Number 3, HACCP, all these huge problems. I mean, it's not problematic. It's problematic for the process, right? But it's necessary. How can we apply all these standards at a corporate level and actually, okay, can we figure out a way to let the underserved communities bring their products in? So I think that's a huge issue at this point in time if we want to allow underserved communities to have access to corporations with bigger budgets and bigger hearts as well, because there's a lot of opportunities such as gifting and team buildings, and they would be more than happy to purchase. But the roadblock is almost always the process at the corporate level.
Absolutely. And actually, Colin, I'd love to get your insights on the same issue, which, of course, Alina has gone a little bit into depth, because as you'd mentioned, it's a clear 50-50 split between management of community ops and the Orang Asli entrepreneurs who are now moving into co-ownership. What are some of the barriers you've observed in the time that you've been around when it comes to expanding and making sure you have that second, third, fourth, and repeated sale?
Yep. I think you made a wonderful point that something is not really addressed in our industry is selling based off poverty or empathy as the key goal. Because I sell, like one of our products, the indigenous sambal, is made by the women, and yes, they are marginalized, part of the marginalized society as well. But that is not the reason why we're selling the sambal. It is a traditional sambal that once you taste it, you will fall in love with it. And
it's part of our Malaysian heritage as well, right?
And,
a little known one because it comes from our indigenous communities.
Yes, and so my position is more to show people what our Orang Asli partners are capable of making, and the products can speak for itself instead of relying on customers that feel empathic towards our cause or think that we are doing something that's helping the world per se. And when you go based on the value of your product, most of the time I see retention in customers. People get in touch with us, they like the idea of what we're doing, but once they touch the sambal and they taste it, and they start WhatsApping you about how great it is and how they would keep repeating the orders, I think that is when you reach a level on which you have already brought them to market appropriately.
Exactly. That whole, try it, love it, and then that's what makes you a repeated customer, right?
Yes.
Perhaps a little bit more doable with consumer products. Okay,
Yeah.
Aida, you're, of course, exactly in that line, consumer products, right? But also, because Ibupreneur was started out in about 2019 or so, now looking back over time, what type of 5-year survival rate have you been able to observe for some of your Ibupreneur entrepreneurs?
Business survival rate for us means active operations, despite of any pauses or declining revenues.
Understood.
So for Ibupreneur supported businesses, survival rate is approximately 75%. And we attribute...
Very healthy, very healthy. Yeah.
We attribute this to 3 things. One is a very consistent monitoring and evaluation framework. Second is a very targeted planning for their businesses.
Right.
Third, I would say, is the social finance for sustainability, because we offer that. Because what happens is in that 5-year, so for context, what happens in the first year is usually about finding the right product, going to market and validating. And second year, it's perhaps tweaking a bit of your products to make sure people love it even more.
Right, once you've landed on something pretty good. Yeah.
Yes. And third year is another test of survival, because that's where you would tend to see what really makes money, and business model does change at this time. And
sure.
Yes.
3 years is a long time when it comes to innovation, right?
Yes.
Okay, now we're in 2025. Who knows how the next 5 years will go? Yeah.
And year 4, good products, for example, Colin mentioned, we want to share the sambal, but good products need good management. That means systems and growth needs to be in place. They have to put accounting measures. They need to bring lawyers in to protect their good sambals, because
copyright, for example, perhaps, yes.
So those things have to come in place. And year 5 is where you usually expect more stable revenue stream and sustainability. So the remainder that don't survive, oftentimes we see it in year 4, because good products need good management.
Yeah.
How do you stay relevant? How do you compete with those companies with better scale? Who has large branding budgets?
And it's, of course, new at year 4 compared to somebody coming out at year 0.
Yes.
Yeah, new versus something tried and trusted, or is it just old? Yeah.
So we do see some challenges in within those years. However, for us, I wouldn't say insufficient funding is a problem because we have really good partners from institutions that provide social finance for sustainability. So that's where we
Yes,
come
we've
in.
got a good, strong pipeline over there.
Yes. However, for women, I see challenge in year 4 where they have to manage systems and manage their own personal life. Because, you know, as a woman, we have pressure from personal demands. We could be having a child between those years because actually 5 years is a long time.
That's right. Your family could be expanding,
Yes.
and quite often, what perhaps proportion of Ibupreneur moms are also those who are single female households?
So right now, majority of them is around 65%.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that adds the dimension of all of the care burden, unpaid care, and also the paid work that you do is only on the mother's shoulders, yes?
So, for example, one of our high-performing entrepreneurs, Khaleeda, got really good social finance support. You know, she expanded to 10 locations. Her business really bloomed. However, at the same time, she's battling a divorce case for her 4 children to fight for nafkah. And that's what's really happening in her life, which she won the case, by the way, so really wonderful. But these are the things that's happening on the ground. So we are still working together to grow the ecosystem together with Elena, how we can go beyond just business, however, providing a whole-rounded healthcare, childcare, coaching to really improve how we can grow together.
Exactly. I mean, I'm also hearing you on the fact that part of that ecosystem involves ensuring that there is access to childcare, for example. How is that managed on a ground level, family to family, woman to woman?
So right now, a lot of the childcare is still very informal still, especially in the underprivileged, because childcare, while we have support from platforms like Keto Care, it's still slightly on the more expensive for them.
Not affordable for this specific target market. Thank you. Thanks very much for the conversation so far, Ida, Alina, as well as Colin. We do take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the rest of the show on Niaga Spotlight.
Apakah maksud sebenar perpaduan? Jom kita tengok sendiri.
Saya inspiredlah dengan
Of course, on our Merdeka Day special, we're looking at the primary dimension of freedom, which is, of course, economic independence. I have in the studio with me 3 incredible leaders who are working in their own dimensions, looking at uplifting those from economically underprivileged and marginalized backgrounds. Alina, going into the work that you do with Yellow Tree, which is a little broader, of course, and let's now zoom in on looking at rural MSMEs. Tell us more about what kind of survival challenges that they actually face, particularly within the first year. Getting off the ground is hard enough, but staying afloat for the first 12 months. Tell us more.
Okay, I think first of all, we must define the word survival because it means very differently, especially in the MSME, especially rural MSME, and in the urban context.
Right.
For the urban context, survival rate in a year is how's your cash flow? Did you increase your sales by 3%, 4%? Or are you making money? The truth is, on the ground, for rural MSMEs, it's not about that. Survival rate, could mean mental health. It could be making ends meet. It could be basically trying to find new ways to make money. So I'm just going to give a few examples here where it's very informal. And you could see, for example, a stall that's set up selling drinks or snacks, and it could be there for 5 years and not have any cash flow. And it's important to see it from this lens, because a lot of those in rural areas, the families are very tight, meaning that they stay together a lot. So there's a lot of support. So very few are going to go hungry, for example. And they have various sources of income. It could be from their spouse. It could be that they're living in a home with their grandmothers or their parents.
Intergenerational homes, yes, multi-generational.
Generational homes. And then are we actually looking at survival rates in terms of finance? I'm not quite sure. And there's no data to support that either. So survival rates, it really depends on...
Versus economic activity.
Versus economic activity. How much are they making? So the survival rate, if I were to... Okay, let's put it in an urban context. If there were 10 rural entrepreneurs, like Ida was saying, first year is very hard, second and third year. To be very honest, I think like there'd be 30%, 3 out of 10 would survive financially, have a healthy cash flow, and actually revenue coming in for them to sustain their lifestyle at the rural level. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a really complex question. Then let's perhaps look at those rural operators who are actually at the MSME scale, and they may have gone beyond the model of having a location-based stall, perhaps on their own land, etc., to those who are actually doing business that involves freight, etc., possibly to nearby urban centers. What's their survival rate like, and what kind of barriers have they faced in your experience?
A lot of the businesses, and we've already heard from Colin and Ida, a lot of businesses from underserved communities are mostly food products.
That's correct, absolutely. F&B is basically it.
Right, or labor, basically. And when you are, for example, if you've scaled up and you are going to sell, let's just say on Shopee or Lazada.
Sure.
So access to market. When the foundation's not done right, such as testing products, the shelf life of products, it's going to be very difficult to go further. If you're very far from the urban centers, chances are the product's going to go bad by the time it reaches urban centers, or the access that you want to scale your business. And if out there you've actually ordered sambals from far, states from far away, you would actually see, the package leaks or something's bad. So almost automatically your brand is cancelled. And those are the risks that they face. First, it's the product. Is it good enough to be scaled? Can it be scaled? So that's one. And secondly, it's skills, actual entrepreneurial skills, because when you start scaling, there are many processes that you have to start yourself.
From scratch, perhaps.
From scratch. Even
with no kind of a guideline or book.
Exactly. Even for us who are more privileged, we can't do that. It's challenging for us to start our own process, let alone an underprivileged entrepreneur from the rural areas of Malaysia.
Absolutely. I hear you on a lot of that, which is why I'm going to jump quickly to Colin and look at basically the dimension of scaling and what kind of stress tests would be involved when it comes to perhaps wanting for one of the Orang Asli community co-creators, co-owners to scale up. What do you feel would be the first challenges? Have you already tried scaling up with specific creators?
Yeah, so let's speak particularly about the sambal business. I think it ties to the point that she made. Like she said, when your access is very far away, that becomes a big issue. And a lot of the times when you hit a customer the first time, that becomes his opinion on your whole brand, and that kind of sticks. So for us, prior to going into like scaling up of the business, we did it very methodically, where we planned it in terms of like growth. So we can account for maybe 2 or 2.5 times our growth. Right. But if you were to put an unnatural level of growth into our current business, I think capital becomes the first issue that we find. Because not just making orang asli cooks into our partners itself, but we try to fund indigenous jobs, which is like indigenous planting, harvesting, farming, and things like that. And so a lot of times we absorb an additional cost to sustain this as newly created jobs.
Understood, exactly, because it's also the infrastructure is equally important for ensuring that the community is well settled, right?
Yes, and when you get into these sort of businesses and this sort of parts of the businesses, in order for an indigenous partner of ours to be a farmer, a sustainable farmer, we have to help them across land rights issues, equipment, training. In order for our cooks to even hit the market, we had to give clean water access to some of our partners' homes. On top of that, we had to bring them up to national levels of certifications. So like with food safety standards, getting the right jabs, going through the right courses and all this. So when it comes to scaling, we face a lot of unseen additional costs. And so we are very cautious about how we go about scaling at an accelerated pace.
Scale is not necessarily the end goal, right?
Yes, and it's all right to operate in scarcity as well.
Absolutely. It's about changing the mindset and also knowing what fits best for that specific family, for that specific community. Speaking of which, Ida, I'd love for you to be able to tell us a little more about maybe how many of your ibupreneurs have also then looked at transitioning into formal employment. Is this also a goal of some?
I would say priority, they still want micro-entrepreneurship because it provides flexibility, running home-based business while still taking care of children. However, we did speak about, the survival rates previously. So what happens if they're out of business? So employment in our network, 15% of them has entered back to formal employment.
So entered back, meaning they used to be formally employed within structures?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yes.
So that exposure generally also means that when an opportunity may arise, they are the ones more likely to take it.
Yes, because what happens is usually, according to data, women exit workforce once they are in childbearing phase.
Yes, correct. That's Malaysia's graph, and quite often we don't see that double camel hump of women going back in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those 15% from home-based vendors or doing informal work, usually they don't have social protection like
That's
EPF or
right.
SOCSO,
yeah.
etc. Even though nationally we have initiatives, for example, like the Pasaran or the Suri protection from SOCSO as entrepreneurs, but we see those going back to employment as a chance to rebuild themselves. For example, we've seen really successful micro-entrepreneurs setting up several urban booths. However, she got scammed off her business savings. So going back to
the vulnerabilities of those from economically underserved backgrounds to falling prey to financial scams as well.
Yes. So she had to go back to employment because she as a single mom, she has 5 kids at home. So it provides stability, gives her ability to rebuild her financial savings in an event that she decides to go back to entrepreneurship. So employment is one of the routes for us.
One of the routes, perhaps. And also, of course, with just yesterday, in fact, the tabling of the gig workers bill, that also then helps to provide a framework moving towards EPF, SOCSO, and other protections for those working in this informal economy. Thank you, Ida. Alina, let's move into digging deeper on another issue, digital income conversion. Now, 4G coverage around Malaysia has increasingly been becoming better and better. We're close to almost 100% coverage as of the end of 2024. But at the same time, I think the question always comes into looking at vulnerable communities who are already using digitized access to create income. But why isn't digital access increasing income commensurately?
Okay, very, very good question, because over 90% access is very, it's admirable, right, for a country. Now, I think there's also this perception that when everyone has a mobile phone, they are digitally literate.
There you go. Let's dig deeper. Tell me more.
That's an issue because, of course, if you'd like to go to YouTube, going on Instagram and TikTok, that's very simple. You just click on an app, everyone's using it. So in time, you will learn how to use these apps, which is actually entertainment. But when you go into business and you want to be an entrepreneur, that's a different game altogether. So are the communities that we are serving, or anyone who wants to assist, are we helping them with digital literacy, with entrepreneurship as a foundation? So let's just a simple example. When you want to start a business, what do? You actually register online, and everything's online. SSM is online now.
Yes, correct.
Correct?
E-invoicing, for example.
E-invoicing.
Yeah.
Second, what do you do next? You've got to go to the bank and actually apply for a bank account. And all these are on digital. And even if we are privileged in urban areas, we get scared. How do we do it? Let alone an underserved woman or man in rural areas. It's incredibly daunting. Are we actually providing them with education and the coaching that allows them to say, okay, let me try it, because it's incredibly hard. On the topic of women, and I'm going to give you an example,
sure,
where if you buy certain things on the rural level, if you scan a code, right, I'd like everyone to actually see where's the money going to. Is it actually the woman or someone else or their spouse? And why am I giving this example is she's doing all the work, but the process of setting up a business and that bank account may not be hers. So if she doesn't understand that process of becoming an entrepreneur, how will she scale? How will she even increase her level of income?
It also perhaps on other dimensions, there is the possibility that opens roads for financial abuse, financial control as well, economic violence, right? If you do not have control of literally the payment channels through which you're receiving money for the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And in many workshops that we've conducted, well, you know, everyone's talking about, oh, let's give them access to laptops, etc., digital access, but some don't even know how to turn on the computer. And when you're an entrepreneur, you have to start processes. So you have to use simple apps such as Excel, Word, and even opening those apps are challenging. How do you use it? Can you type? The basic foundation of digital literacy is not being addressed. And we're just saying, okay, it's accessible, income should increase, everyone should happily and magically be okay the next day. That's not the case, and that's not what we're seeing. And that's concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. Deeply concerning. Now, as we're moving towards closing out the conversation in a while, Colin, I'd of course like to ask you, when you look at the percentage of your revenue, how much of that is actually reinvested into producer training, hopefully to overcome a couple of those challenges which Alina had already mentioned?
Okay, so on paper, we have a percentage of 20% which we reinvest back into the community. But like a very good point that Alina made, there is a lack of training on the grounds. People do have digital access, but they do not know how to take those digital access up to an entrepreneur level. And so what actually happens is that we do end up spending closer to 40-50% at the initial first year. Or that high amount of our revenue goes back into training. But not just like digital access, we provide, like for the sambal to cook, you need clean water. So we provide access for them to get their rights to get water tapped to their house. We solve their issues with like land where they're planting the kantan. And a lot of the times, we do end up spending way beyond 40%.
Understood.
But ultimately, we have on paper, our target is to bring it down back to 20%, where we can easily train the next generation of entrepreneurs from the community. But it's a dual role, because while we have our cooks who are our partners, we also want to replace myself in the business. Like, for example, we have our partner Moi Banje, and she has trouble with literacy, so she cannot address our customers digitally. But what we can do is we can train her daughter to do my job. And eventually, in like 5 to 10 years, time, I won't be in community ops anymore, and she can take over my role and drive it forward.
Custodianship is completely for the community, with the community.
And so we do aim for a targeted 20%, but at our current scale, we give everything we can to make it survive.
Absolutely understood. Thanks very much for that, Colin. And of course, Ida, looking at those dimensions, but when it comes to Ibupreneur, in general, what do your costs look like per entrepreneur who you onboard?
So looking at costs, it involves not only the training, however, we still provide the opportunity cost of them joining trainings.
Understood, because they do need to, for example, perhaps not be at home during those hours.
Yeah, so we provide them with daily expenses, with transportation, because they have to travel all the way from Banting and it takes 2 hours, etc. So, and we even provide social finance, and the monitoring 1 year is still such a heavy cost. However, every 1 ringgit that we spend, we see about 2 to 3 times of incremental monthly income. So over a year, that's a return of 20 times the initial investment. So it's an impact that lasts beyond the program. So relatively, with a modest upfront cost, we're creating a permanent shift in how a mother views entrepreneurship. You know, she's usually operating in a rural center, but what we do is we give her exposure to MNCs with a different market segment, and their standards are different. So her horizon is broadened. So investing in women and trainings is not only really for herself, but it's really how she can further share that broaden horizon with her children and her communities as well.
Absolutely, because when you speak about the support system that goes into onboarding and ensuring that that first year happens, that is the true, perhaps, cost of starting out and sustaining. All right, so as we look at wrapping up the entire discussion, perhaps some last thoughts on where we're looking at in the arena of ensuring that economically uplifting our rural communities via MSMEs or other work, informal work. Alina, what does the direction look like for the year ahead?
As much as we'd like to talk about numbers in terms of 1 year ahead, there's a lot going on. And I think some final words, it's to really define success. What does success look like for these communities? And for us, because a lot of people would ask, what are the outcomes? What is the revenue? What is the growth? And you know what? We need to stop there and start redefining what success is to them. And what we're seeing out there, some insights in the market, we need to put a lot more emphasis on coaching these communities. Empathy is huge. Empathy means it's not just feeling sorry, but you are actually walking aside by them and coaching them through that 1 year, through that second year. A lot of work needs to be done in terms of coaching. And mental health challenges, this is something that doesn't come up a lot because everyone's expecting numbers.
Metrics, yes,
metrics.
But that is a huge metric which allows you to operate successfully as a business, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Alina, Colin, Ida, if only we had a little more time, but that's been an excellent, invigorating, and very enlightening discussion. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you
very much.
Well, that's all we have time for today on Niaga Spotlight. With me, Tamina Kausji. We'll see you next week with more economic analysis and insights. And meanwhile, Selamat Hari Merdeka to every Malaysian out there.
Dalam kegelapan, mereka membawa keadilan.
Berapa banyak operasi kita buat untuk kita tumpaskan sindiket ni, tak settle. Mungkin ada orang lain yang terlibat.
Dia dah muncul balik.
Kau nampak lega aku tak mati? Kau nak apa ni? Aku nak kau sendiri arah dua.
Apa ni?
Ini dia Mulai tadi. Lepas apa dia bawa ke Radwa? Aku bunuh kau tengok.
Dapatkah Tarik menyelamatkan Radwa? Tarik Rizua, His Treasure, Rabu dan Kamis, 9 malam di Astro dan Astro Go.
We are underfunded, overstretched, and literally under attack. The needs are going in one direction and the money is going in the other. I think I'm probably the only person in the world now who's been to Darfur, Gaza, Kupiansk, Kabul, Kandahar, Kunduz, Goma, all in the last year. And in all of those crises, I see the impact of these funding cuts, devastating impact on people's lives, on the choices they have to make, which is why we're out there saying that with only 1% of what the world spends on defense, we could save over 100 million lives. So everywhere I go, I spend a lot of time with the local teams, local organizations, local communities who really are the front line of the humanitarian response. I want to shift power to those local organizations and away from the center, away from the hierarchy. When you think about how much money is being made in the global economy right now and the threat to global stability, if we don't meet these challenges, the next pandemic, waves of migration caused by climate change, increasing numbers of people displaced, angry, without hope because of the expansion of conflict. These are all threats to the global economy. Last year, we reached over 100 million people with essential life-saving humanitarian aid. I draw hope from the sense of mission and purpose that I see in so many of our humanitarian colleagues. You know, they are facing real threats, real dangers. Last year was the most deadly year to be a humanitarian worker on record. Watch me if I try to hold them back and try to prevent them going out there to meet these challenges. There's no way I can stop them. They are determined because for them, this isn't a job, it's a vocation.
Number one, ongoing curiosity. Just read every day, okay? Second, humility, because a lot of the students, if you come out with a sense of confidence that you know too much, you often get surprised. And the financial markets are a very great teacher of humility. Your decisions, right or wrong, could change and you may not know the reasons why. And third, I would ask that they cultivate as many relationships as possible, mentors, folks that can help guide them of how to succeed in whatever organization they end up working for. But in many ways, I don't know what the future is going to lie for them. It's going to be very different than when I was going through a financial services career. So the last thing I will ask is that they keep in touch with me so that I can give them some advice, but just as much I can learn from them as they succeed in their career. I remember when I first entered in my own career for banking, learning to use PowerPoint and Excel was considered you're a cream of the crop student. But you quickly learn a few years once you're in industry that these technical skills tend to get out of date very quickly. So what you do want to make sure is that you are able to learn as fast as you can and that you're keeping curious about all the changes and developments. What AI does do is help you process information quickly, but it can't define for you what are your key values that help you make decisions. And ultimately, economics and finance is about making decisions and understanding the trade-offs, but you have to determine what those trade-offs are. What I have found out is that whereas the trend of finance education was increasingly mathematical when I started learning finance, now the pendulum is starting to swing back towards a liberal education, understanding the political systems, the history, how society has evolved. Because as much as you tend to think of finance as very quantitative, in fact, it's very much shaped by the actors in the market and the decisions by very strong personalities.
At the moment, most encryption systems in the world use a combination of what are known as like classical hardware, random number generators. These are based on electronic noise. So if you try to make an electronic circuit, no electronic circuit is 100% perfect. And you leverage that noisy behavior to create some randomness that you can then use. And you use that within a system that also puts it in what's known as a pseudo-random number generator. Over the past decade, we have seen multiple failures of these kind of encryption systems due specifically to the way the randomness is generated, which is pushing a lot of people to look at the next generation of solutions dependent on quantum systems. When you have a particular quantum physical system, and when you try to measure it, the outcome of that measurement is completely probabilistic. There is no way of knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be if that system is in what's known as a superposition of potential states. Every time you measure that system in superposition, you're going to get a result that you cannot predict. A quantum random number generator tries to leverage this feature to create true randomness from an actual physical process. And now randomness has a wide range of applications. The most important of which, and the ones that we focus on at Quantum Dice, are in cybersecurity, where randomness is basically the fundamental core of every single cryptographic protocol that exists. And the other side of it is within probabilistic and stochastic computational methods, where randomness is the fundamental driver of these computational paradigms. Our quantum random number generator has the unique ability to do a continuous evaluation and assurance in real time of the randomness that's being produced, which is a feature that no existing classical system can reproduce. This gives you a level of assurance and a level of verification on the security of your system that we didn't have before.
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Saya Nazri Kaha, ini agenda AWANI. Perkara yang menjadi perdebatan dan juga perjuangan pekerja gig selama ini akhirnya terjawab. Di mana rang undang-undang untuk pekerja gig 2025 selamat dibentangkan untuk bacaan kali pertama. Dan penting kerana untuk melihat kebajikan 1.2 juta itu yang ada dalam rekod Kementerian Sumber Manusia, pekerja gig akan terbela. Kerana masa depan mereka begitu penting, bagaimana hak mereka dalam hal sosial, bantuan sosial dan sebagainya, kerana selama ini ia tidak menjadi keperluan untuk pekerja gig. Jadi banyak perkara dalam RUU pekerja gig 2025 ini sebenarnya mengangkat martabat pekerja gig, bukan hanya perkara yang stereotyping yang kita lihat selama ini, tetapi mungkin dia akan memberi ruang bagaimana pekerja gig menjadikan sumber pendapatan dan akhirnya ada ruang kerjaya yang lebih baik pada masa akan datang. Jadi saya amat berbangga pada malam ini, Yang Berhormat Stephen Sim sebelah kanan saya, Menteri Sumber Manusia Kesuma. Apa khabar YB?
Baik,
lega sedikit bacaan pertama lepas?
Memang rasa bersyukur, tetapi itu hanya langkah pertama.
Langkah pertama.
Perjuangan belum selesai.
Banyak langkah-langkah seterusnya.
Ada lagi kena bacaan kedua, ketiga, kemudian lulus, bawa ke Dewan Negara.
Ya. Okey. Tentang pekerja gig, ini banyak kali kita bawa juga dalam perbincangan di Astro AWANI, sama ada bersama saya dan juga rakan-rakan lain. Dan YB juga bersama saya sebelum ini di sini juga. Adakah dalam RUU pekerja gig 2025 ini definisi pekerja gig itu jelas merangkumi semua yang kita maksudkan pekerja gig?
Saudara Nazri, memang jelas dalam RUU ni. Saya bawa RUU
biru,
Blue Bill ni, dipanggil Blue Bill-nya yang kita bentangkan di Parlimen. Memang ini kali pertama negara kita ada satu definisi yang jelas untuk pekerja gig. Dan ini sebenarnya satu pengiktirafan kepada sumbangan mereka sebagai orang yang membina ekonomi negara. Sebelum ni dia tidak ada apa-apa undang-undang yang mentakrifkan mereka, yang memberi perlindungan. Jadi seakan-akan mereka ini terabai. Tapi selepas adanya RUU gig ini, kita akan ada takrifan dan definisi yang jelas untuk mengenal pasti siapa pekerja gig dan apa perlindungan yang boleh diberikan kepada mereka.
Ya, selama ini kita agak klise YB Stephen Sim, kita merujuk kepada mereka yang dalam sistem ekonomi gig, e-hailing atau penghantaran barangan. Betul. Itu yang dominan. Tetapi sebenarnya apabila kita bercerita mereka yang bertugas ataupun